What's up everybody, blessed be, my name is Manon and you are watching Witch in the Working, where we will be discussing all things witchy in and around, throughout and about, above, below, and beyond. This video offers my personal views at the topic at hand. Please visit me on my other platforms as well, including Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon, all linked down in the description below. The full script of this video and most of the others is available on my Patreon account for download if desired to build your very own Witch in the Working Book of Shadows. Do you need help with a spell or fancy a tarot reading? Shoot on over to my store Bewitching and Bizarre with choices listed down in the description below for your personalized working and or reading. We're talking all about something that's been floating around the witchy corners of the internet for a while now. Baby witches, and the whole messy conversation around gatekeeping in our community. Now before we go any further, no, I don't mean babies casting spells out of the womb. I'm talking about the nickname a lot of newer witches get labeled with, often without asking for it. Some folks wear it like a badge of honor, others feel like it shrinks them down, and plenty are just confused about the whole damn thing. And then there's the gatekeeping side of it. You know the vibe. People telling you what you can't do and who you aren't allowed to be and what makes a real witch. Yeah, we're going to talk all about that too. But don't worry, this isn't a call-out video or a roast session. This is about exploring where these ideas came from, why they stick around, and how we as a community can do better. Whether you're fresh on your path or have been stirring the cauldron for decades, this conversation affects all of us. So if you've ever wondered where the term baby witch came from, why people get so heated over it, or how we can build real bridges between new and experienced witches, this one's for you. So let's get into it. Roll intro. Welcome back everyone. Let's take a stroll down the digital path and unpack this odd little phrase that's been floating around the magical community, baby witch. Chances are if you've spent any time in online witchy spaces, especially TikTok, Instagram, or Reddit, you've stumbled across it. You might have even been called one yourself, but where did this label actually come from and why does it spark such a mixed bag of reactions? The term baby witch didn't exactly spring out of some ancient grimoire or sacred scroll. It's a modern internet-born nickname, and like a lot of trends, it gained traction quickly thanks to social media. Around 2018 to 2020, the term started showing up in witchcraft spaces online, often used in a light-hearted, affectionate way to refer to someone new to the craft. It's kind of like calling a new musician a baby rocker or a first-year college student a freshie or a frosh. The intent, at least originally, was to be cute and relatable. At first glance, it might seem harmless or even sweet, a way to embrace the awkward, beautiful, chaotic early stages of the magical journey. People would share things like, here's a spell I did, I'm just a baby witch, so go easy on me. And while that vulnerability is totally valid, the problem is that words carry weight, and over time, that cute little phrase began to pick up some baggage. Here's the thing. Once a term starts spreading like wildfire, especially online, it doesn't stay in its original form for long. Some folks begin using baby witch in a condescending way. Instead of it being a self-chosen label, it became something assigned like a stamp of inexperience. And let's be real, no one likes being put in a box, especially one that implies they're not real or serious enough to be taken seriously. There's also the deeper issue of how we talk about growth in spiritual paths. Calling someone a baby anything can unintentionally sound like we're not giving them credit for their effort. Learning to cast a circle, work with deities, or read tarot isn't baby work, it's real work. It's valid, meaningful, and often deeply personal. Just because someone is at the beginning of their journey doesn't mean they're not already walking a powerful path. And let's not forget how age complicates things. Some older witches, who are new to the craft, feel weird being called baby witches. Imagine being in your 40s, driving deep into your spirituality for the first time, and someone calls you a baby. Kinda weird, right? It doesn't always land the way people intend. It's not about being offended by cutesy language, it's about being seen for where you truly are on your path. Now this doesn't mean we need to throw the term in the bonfire and never speak of it again. Some folks really like calling themselves baby witches. They find comfort in the community it creates and enjoy the shared experience of learning and exploring. And that's totally fine. The key word here is choice. It's about whether you want to identify that way, not whether someone else decides that that's your label. So instead of debating whether the term should exist at all, maybe the better question is, are we using it with kindness? Are we offering guidance and encouragement instead of judgment and superiority? If we're truly honoring the spirit of the craft, which is about personal empowerment, connection to the unseen, and respect for the journey, then we should be lifting one another up, not ranking each other by experience points. In the end, baby witch is just one of the many terms that have popped up to describe a stage in someone's spiritual development. But no matter what label someone wears or refuses to wear, the path of the witch is unique, sacred, and ever evolving. Whether you've just bought your first deck of tarot cards or you've been dancing under the moon for decades, what matters most is that your practice is yours. So next time you see someone online call themselves a baby witch, smile and remember, we were all new once. And for those who don't like the term, that's valid too. We can leave space for both perspectives, just like we do in a good circle, because the craft has always been big enough for all of us. Alright, let's talk about something that doesn't require herbs, moon phases, or ritual tools, but might be one of the most potent forces in your entire practice: language. Yep, just words. But not just any words. We're talking about how we talk about ourselves, each other, and the craft as a whole. And let me tell you, the way we speak about magic and our place within it has more influence than most people realize. Words are spells, literally. Every time you speak, especially with intention, you're weaving energy into the world. That's why how we label ourselves and how we label others matters. When someone calls themselves a witch, a seer, a healer, or a chaos magician, for instance, they're not just tossing out a fun title. They're claiming an identity. They're saying, this is who I am, this is what I do, and that declaration shapes not only how others see them, but how they see themselves. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Over time, the magical community, especially online, has built up a whole vocabulary of roles and labels: baby witch, hedge witch, green witch, traditionalist, eclectic, solitary, high priestess, and so on and so on. These terms can help people find their footing, connect with like-minded folks, and feel a sense of belonging. It's comforting to know there's a word that reflects how you practice, especially when you're just getting started. But there's a flip side. Sometimes labels become limits. What starts out as a helpful term can quickly become a box. Someone might say, oh, I'm just a solitary witch, and then feel like they can't join a coven or explore ceremonial magic. Or they'll call themselves a kitchen witch and start second guessing whether it's okay to perform a planetary ritual under a full moon. See where I'm going with this? Language shapes expectation, and expectation can either open a door or slam it shut. That's why it's so important that we don't let these words turn into fences. A label should describe where you're at, not define where you're allowed to go. Then there's how we talk about others in the craft. This is where things get tricky. Sometimes people toss out terms like fluff bunny, baby witch, or armchair occultist to describe someone they don't take seriously. But let's be real for a second. None of us showed up knowing everything. We all had our first candle spell, our first awkward attempt at grounding, our first did that actually work moment. So if someone's still figuring things out, is that a reason to belittle them? Instead, how about we treat words like tools for connection instead of separation? If someone calls themselves a baby witch and that term makes them feel safe and seen, great. But if another person prefers novice or doesn't want a label at all, that's cool too. The important thing is that each practitioner gets to choose how they describe their own journey. For some seasoned witches, this is a chance to be mindful. Your words carry influence. If you call someone's practice chaotic, misguided, or untraditional, even casually, it can shape how that person feels about their own magic. And who are we to say what path someone else is meant to walk? What looks like chaos to one witch might be wild creativity to another. And here's a deeper layer to all of this. Language also connects us to the spirits, energies, and deities we work with. Whether you're speaking an ancient chant, crafting a spell with rhyme, or whispering a prayer under your breath, your words hold power. Choosing the right ones, the intentional ones, is a big part of our responsibility as practitioners. So what's the takeaway? Speak with care. Whether you're talking about yourself, a fellow witch, or the craft itself, understand that your words are energy in motion. They can uplift, encourage, and empower, or they can shame, restrict, and discourage. And none of us came to this path to be boxed in. Remember, magic is fluid, personal, and always evolving. So let your language reflect that. Be open, be kind, and most of all, be intentional. Because every word you use in your spiritual identity is a spell in itself. Make it one worth casting. Let's talk about something that's stirred up more online drama than a Mercury retrograde during eclipse season: gatekeeping in the magical community. Now, if you've spent any amount of time in witchy spaces, especially the ones floating around like TikTok, Reddit, or YouTube, you've probably seen this word thrown around like a hex bag at a full moon bonfire. But what does it really mean? And why does it keep showing up in conversations about who gets to be a real witch? At its core, gatekeeping is when someone tries to decide who deserves to be a part of a group, or in our case, the spiritual community. It's the whole "you're not doing it right" or "you can't call yourself a witch unless" kind of vibe. And it can show up in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's blatant, like someone flat out saying you're not a real witch because you don't belong to a coven or weren't initiated by a specific tradition. Other times it's subtle, like mocking someone's spell jar on social media or making passive-aggressive comments about beginner witches, messing with things they don't understand. Now here's the thing, not all boundaries are bad. There is such a thing as healthy limits, especially when it comes to respecting closed practices, ancestral traditions, or cultural rituals that aren't meant to be shared outside of that community. That's not gatekeeping, that's honoring spiritual sovereignty and avoiding appropriation. There's a huge difference between saying this isn't yours to work with and saying you're not a real witch unless you do it my way. Gatekeeping crosses the line when it becomes about ego and exclusion. When someone decides they're the high and mighty keeper of all knowledge and starts dishing out judgments like it's their job, that's where the real damage begins. It stops being about protecting the craft and starts becoming about protecting one's status in the craft. And honestly, that kind of energy has no place in a spiritual path that's supposed to be about empowerment and connection. So why does this even happen? Why do some witches feel the need to act like they're guarding the gates of some mystical VIP lounge? Well, part of it comes from fear. Fear of the craft being watered down, misused, or turned into a trend. And let's be honest, there is a lot of fluff floating around online. Misinformation spreads fast. People post spells without knowing where they came from or start dabbling in things that are honestly above their current understanding. So some more experienced practitioners feel the need to step in, correct, or even scold. But the problem is when that correction turns into condemnation, it becomes more about control than education. You can correct someone without humiliating them. You can protect traditions without shaming people who are still learning. The goal should be guidance, not gatekeeping. Another reason it happens is that some folks tie their identity to being the expert or the elder. And when new witches come in with fresh energy, new tools, or ways of doing things that break the mold, it can feel like a threat. But that's the thing about magic. It's not static. It grows, it evolves, and just because something is new doesn't mean it's wrong. Gatekeeping can also come from a place of trauma. Some witches had to fight tooth and nail to learn what they know. Maybe they were shunned, hurt, or had to study in secret. So when they see others learning openly or casually, it feels unfair. That pain is valid, but passing it down as judgment isn't healing anyone. So what's the antidote to all of this? Compassion. Conversation, a willingness to listen and to teach without preaching. We don't need more spiritual police. We need more mentors, more bridges, and more people willing to say, hey, I see where you're at. Want some help finding your way? At the end of the day, no one owns the craft. It doesn't belong to me or you or the loudest voice in the room. It belongs to those who walk it with honesty, curiosity, and respect. Whether you're Gardnerian, eclectic, or just getting started with moon water and a couple of crystals, your path is yours, and as long as you're walking it with intention and integrity, you belong. Let's get something straight. Just because you know more doesn't mean you get to swing it around like a sword. In the magical world, just like in everyday life, knowledge is power. But power without compassion, that's just ego in a fancy cloak. This part of the video is all about shifting the way we think about wisdom in the craft. Whether you've been practicing for 30 years or 30 days, we all start somewhere, and the journey never really ends. The craft is deep. It's layered. It can take a lifetime or several to explore. But somewhere along the way, some witches start treating what they've learned like currency or even worse, like ammunition. And that, my friend, is where things start to go sideways. Here's the thing. Knowing more doesn't make you better. It makes you responsible. When you've studied for years, when you've read the books, worked with deities, made mistakes, grown through them, and finally feel like you've got your footing, awesome. That's something to be proud of. But it's not a free pass to look down your nose at someone still learning how to center or ground. Unfortunately, there's a weird culture that's crept into some corners of the magical community where certain practitioners act like gatekeepers of truth, using obscure terminology or historical references as if they were casting spells to confuse rather than to enlighten. If you've ever been in a group where someone responds to a simple question with a 3-paragraph quote from a 17th century grimoire without context, yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That kind of behavior isn't about education, it's about domination. It turns sacred knowledge into a weapon or exclusion, and that goes against the very spirit of what this path is all about. Magic at its heart is about connection to yourself, to nature, to the divine, and yes, to one another. So let's flip the script. What if we saw knowledge as a lantern instead of a sword? Something that lights the path, not just for us, but for those walking behind us, beside us, and even in different directions. Instead of hoarding information like it's some rare spell component, we can share what we know with kindness, patience, and humility. Now, to be clear, this doesn't mean that everyone has to be a teacher. Not everyone is called to guide others, and that's totally valid. But if you're choosing to speak up, especially in public or group spaces, how you say something matters just as much as what you say. You can correct misinformation without shaming someone. You can share insights without sounding like you've got a superiority complex. You can explain the history of Beltane without making someone feel bad for calling it Witch's Mayday. It's all in the tone, the timing, and most importantly, the intention. And if you're newer to the craft, don't let anyone make you feel small for not knowing everything. Nobody came into this world with a book of shadows in their hand. Ask your questions, experiment, take what resonates and leave the rest. You don't have to earn your place in the magical world with encyclopedic knowledge. You earn it by showing up, curious, open, and sincere. The idea that knowledge should be kept away from beginners until they've proven themselves is outdated. Sure, there are some teachings that need context and maturity, but that doesn't mean we dangle them like a carrot on a stick. What we need more of are mentors, not magical gatekeepers. Guides who say, here's what I've learned. Take what helps and make it your own. And let's be real, there's always more to learn. Even the most seasoned witches are still students. The moment you think you've learned it all, you've probably stopped growing. The craft thrives on evolution, and the best practitioners know that wisdom grows when it's shared, not when it's weaponized. So let your knowledge be something that inspires, not intimidates. Share your journey without expecting others to walk the same exact path. Teach if you feel called, but teach with heart. Correct if you must, but do it with care. Because when we treat knowledge like a gift instead of a prize, we build a community where everyone can rise. Let's wrap this journey up by talking about something that should be at the core of any spiritual community: connection. Not hierarchy, not who's more legit, but honest to goodness connection between those who are just stepping onto the path and those who've been walking it for years. You see, in any kind of tradition, especially something as vast and ever evolving as witchcraft, there's naturally going to be a spectrum of experience. On one end, you've got the bright-eyed newcomers, full of questions and curiosity. On the other, you've got these seasoned practitioners who've read all the dusty tomes, worked through their dark nights of the soul, and probably have a favorite incense brand they swear by. And in between, a whole plethora of witches just doing their thing. The trouble starts when a divide forms between those groups, when new witches feel like they have to walk on eggshells around elders, or when experienced witches get jaded and stop being open to fresh perspectives. And if we're being honest, we've all seen that divide play out, online, in circles, maybe even within our own little covens or groups. But it doesn't have to be that way. In fact, the strength of the craft has always come from its ability to adapt, to evolve, and to pass wisdom from one hand to the next. So instead of building walls between new and experienced practitioners, we need to start building bridges, and I mean sturdy, supportive ones that people can actually walk across. So how do we do that? Well, for starters, if you're someone who's been practicing for a while, remember what it felt like when you were new. That excitement, the confusion, the thrill of discovering that the world is full of subtle energies and hidden symbols. If someone had told you back then that you were doing it wrong or scoffed at your first spell, how might that have changed your path? Being an experienced witch isn't just about what you know, it's about how you hold space for those who are still learning. That could mean answering questions with kindness, pointing folks toward helpful resources, or simply saying, hey, I've been there. You don't have to be a formal teacher to be a mentor. Sometimes just being available is enough. Now, if you're newer to the craft, don't let fear or imposter syndrome keep you from asking questions or reaching out. Every witch you admire started somewhere. They lit their first candle, flubbed a chant or two, and probably second-guessed themselves 100 times. You're not behind, you're just at a different mile marker, and that's okay. One of the most beautiful things about witchcraft is that it's non-linear. It's not a straight road with checkpoints and titles. You're not less of a witch because you don't know every herb or haven't worked with a specific deity. You bring your own flavor, your own life experiences, your own magic, and that adds to the collective cauldron of knowledge we all benefit from. We also need to foster safe, respectful spaces, both online and in real life, where witches at all levels can gather without fear or ridicule or gatekeeping. That means calling out toxic behavior when we see it and modeling better ways to communicate. It means curating Facebook groups, Discord servers, covens, or local meetups where curiosity is encouraged and no one feels like they're not enough. A little mutual respect goes a long way. Imagine how much we could all grow if we stopped comparing, stopped competing, and started collaborating instead. If we recognize that newer witches have just as much to offer, new insights, new questions, fresh eyes, as those who've been in the game for decades. And honestly, this kind of bridge building, it's what keeps the craft alive. Traditions passed down with kindness survive. Communities built on empathy thrive. And when we all make space for one another, the magic flows stronger than ever. So whether you're the one lighting your very first candle or the one teaching the class on planetary hours, remember, we're all part of the same circle. And in that circle, there's no top or bottom, just a shared path walked together. So, when it all boils down, this path we walk, whether we call it Wicca, witchcraft, or something entirely personal, it isn't about titles, timelines, or who's been practicing the longest. It's about authenticity. It's about tapping into the rhythm of nature, learning as we go, and finding meaning in both the simple and the sacred. The terms we use, like baby witch, only have as much power as we give them. And if we choose to lead with kindness instead of control, curiosity instead of criticism, then we're already helping shift the vibe of the community in a big way. Whether you're just beginning your journey or you've been casting circles since dial-up internet was a thing, you matter. Your practice matters, and how we treat each other absolutely matters. The magic is richer when we're supporting, not competing, teaching, not gatekeeping. So let's keep those doors open, the conversations flowing, and the candles lit for ourselves and for every witch who comes after us. Because the craft isn't just about spells, it's about building something lasting together. Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of Witch in the Working. What do you think about the term baby witch? How do you feel about gatekeeping in the craft? Let us all know in the comments below. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and please subscribe if you haven't already. And don't forget to ring that little bell to be reminded of the wonderful and exciting future episodes to come. Love you guys and gals. Blessed be.